thank you to all the organizers for giving me the privilege of moderating this. It always gives me joy to see a room with this many people in it who care about politics. And I think we've seen the last few years how much it really matters who's in charge. I'll give you a brief rundown of how this works. Each of the candidates will have a chance to make an opening statement. We drew numbers in the back room to see who would go first and second and third. I have a set of questions prepared by the sponsors, and I'll ask those. Each of the candidates will get a chance to talk about those things. And I believe there are out in the crowd index cards if you have questions that you would like posed, and volunteers will collect those. Who are the volunteers who will collect the cards? Lots. And distribute them if you don't have them. Put up a hand and you'll get one. They'll come to the table over here where they'll be collated. We'll try to ask as wide a range as we can while still focusing on the things that people apparently want to know the most about. I think that is all the important stuff. So why don't we begin? The numbers that we drew have Rebecca Bromwich going first, followed by Dan Rogers, and then Sean Menard. Ms. Bromwich, tell us about yourself, why you're running in this ward, and what you want to do.
Well, hello, and thank you to the volunteers from the Glebe Community Association. Volunteers from the Glebe Community Association must be around here, and the Dow's Lake folks, and the Glebe Annex people who've come as volunteers, the Heron Park, Old Ottawa East, Old Ottawa South, Riverview Park Community Association. Thank you, folks. You are community builders, and I'm here because I want to continue to build the community with you. The incumbent signs says he wants to fight for our city. I take a different view. Like Johnny Cash, I've been out walking, and I'm not looking for a fight. I don't want a battle. When you go out looking for a fight, that's exactly what you get. We can survive battles, but we suffer through them, and we suffer from them. I take a different approach by training, experience, and inclination. I'm running for Ward 17 councillor because I want our city to thrive, and I want Capital Ward to thrive together. We need a different approach. There has been too much infighting and acrimony on council, and I'm a fresh start, and I'm here to bring a different tone. The past term of council was marked by combativeness and dysfunction, and since amalgamation, we've been facing a lot of controversy, and when councillors are differently positioned between the suburbs and the urban areas, there's a lot of conflict. In my own family, my kids, some of whom are here this evening, live half the time with me and half the time with their dad in the suburbs. And so I have a different understanding of us all being neighbors and sometimes all being the same family across the city of Ottawa. My heart is in the urban core of Ottawa. My heart is in Capital Ward. I work at Carleton University, and we are each other's neighbors. On seeing this dysfunction, watching City Council, particularly at the time of the convoy, watching the Zoom meetings, I thought my training in mediation, negotiation, and conflict resolution can actually help me bring some value for Capital Ward in public service. I have significant experience growing the pie rather than just cutting the pie apart. I can create value with you, working with you to claim and create value, moving parties away from entrenched positions to finding common ground based on shared interests. And that is what we need. My mission in running for City Council is to bring my conflict resolution training, my passion for fair process, the years of experience as a lawyer, my years of experience as a teacher, to bear and to be of some value so we can all work together. The question that was posited when we received an email is, are you qualified? Well, I'd be happy to talk to you afterwards. I'm more than qualified. I am more than ready. Together, we can get Capital Ward its fair share. I ask for your vote and your support. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Dan Rogers.
Thanks very much. Good evening and welcome to all of you. It's great to be here with friends and neighbors to discuss the future of Capital Ward and our city. It's become clear to me that something has gone terribly wrong at City Hall. Our city is beset with problems that include a failing transit system, homelessness, mental health issues, and rising crime. The concerns of small business owners, the lifeblood of our community, have been lost in the noise of arguments between those representing various interest groups. They've lost sight of the greater objective of building a sustainable, diverse, inclusive city that works for everyone. And that's why I joined the race. I'm not tied to any lobby or ideology, and therefore well positioned to reach out across all constituencies. I bring more than 30 years of experience in negotiating political solutions to difficult challenges through my service in federal government and as a consultant on public affairs and transportation issues. I served as the Chief of Staff to a federal transport minister and was appointed Chief of Staff to the government House Leader in 2004 because Prime Minister Paul Martin believed I was the right person to help negotiate with other parties during a minority government. I've worked as the Director of Government Relations for the Canadian Bankers Association and for the Railway Association of Canada. For the last 3 years, I've been the proud owner, co-owner of and operator of a pub in the Glebe located on Bank Street, the heartbeat of Capital Ward. My partner and I bought the pub just before COVID struck, and we're still here. So I know a little something about getting along with others and navigating troubled waters. In the current uncertain economic environment, we must understand we can't afford everything. We need to choose our priorities carefully and proceed in a manner that is effective and sustainable. This means consulting with subject experts, constructive engagement with representatives from all sides, and negotiating consensus that works for the greater good. No more failing to return calls from those who disagree with you. In the past week, I've had sit-down meetings with mental health experts and developers. I have found that there is common ground on how to move forward. Our city is growing and is going to continue to grow. New development and intensification is necessary, but must be done in a way that not negatively impacts our existing neighborhoods. Along with climate change, affordable housing must be a priority. Experts tell us that more affordable housing is the most important consideration in addressing the growing mental health challenge. This includes more community policing, getting officers out of their cars and onto the sidewalks to interact with people. I'm a proponent of an expanded LRT and a lover of railways generally to move and facilitate the movement of people in and out of our city core. I look forward to tonight's discussion. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much for that. Sean Menard.
Thanks so much, David. And I just want to say thank you so much for being here, our work together over the years. And this is usually one of the most well-attended debates in the city. So it's nice to see all of you out here and a testament to the community associations who organize it. Many of you will have interacted with our office, and you may not know much about my background, though, besides being the city councillor. I grew up in Ottawa, and it was 20 years ago that I began my studies at Carleton University in Capital Ward and taking criminology, criminal justice, and eventually graduating with a master's degree in public policy and administration. And it was at Carleton where I became the vice chair of the City of Ottawa's Pedestrian and Transit Advisory Committee and president of a local community association. And one of the big things I achieved back then was the introduction of Ottawa's Transit U-Pass program, which continues today. I've worked in the federal government for the Department of Justice, for a not-for-profit as manager for FCM, and started my own business working for cities from across the country on their climate, housing, and infrastructure goals. I see school board trustee candidates here, and I want to congratulate them on running. I held that position for 4 years before becoming a city councillor, and it is a tough but extremely important job, so thank you for putting your names forward. I will not be taking developer-connected donations in this campaign, nor did I take any in 2018, and I will release my donors well in advance of the election date. I live in Old Ottawa South with my partner and 2 kids. Cohen is 6 and Hazel is 3. There's really 5 main areas that we're going to focus on in Capital Ward for the next term. The first is just continuing to be responsive at all times. I think in our greatest times of need, like what we saw with the convoy occupation, the Derecho storm, or the 2019 floods, our team was on the ground serving you. I think you probably saw us in the streets, whether it was on the front lines at Billings Bridge, really fighting for our neighbors at certain times when we had to do that, visiting small businesses or being on the phone with Hydro, working for our ward. The second is that we're going to prioritize our parks. You can expect movement on a large renovation to Brewer Park, a new field house at Windsor. We've secured funding for a new community building in Heron Park. The Forecourt Park in Grand LA will take shape in Old Ottawa East, and we're making investments in Central Park and the completion of the new fire station park on O'Connor. Third, we're going to be focused on affordable housing and development. This includes the proposals for Lansdowne. which haven't been properly consulted on nor demonstrated to be in the best public interest. And we will push the city to do the right thing and reallocate funds from developer subsidies and road widenings to purpose-built permanent affordable housing. Fourth, on climate change, this is the greatest threat facing Ottawa. We'll be working to stop sprawl in the city, which we subsidize with our tax dollars here in Capital Ward. We need to invest in retrofits to our buildings, a new approach to waste, protect our tree canopy, and stop the proposed AVTC, which is a 4-lane road cutting through the People's Park in Old Ottawa East. Fifth, and finally, on transportation, you've seen what we've done in this ward. We've lowered the speed limit on all residential streets to 30 kilometers an hour and added new traffic calming. We've redesigned the Bank Street Bridge with improved sidewalks and segregated bike lanes, and improved school zones with 4th Avenue next up this fall. In the next term of council.
That is time.
Thanks so much, David.
I should have introduced our extremely strict timekeeper, Brian Carroll, who's equipped with 2 watches and possibly other timepieces. He's not messing around. I'm going to move on to the questions now that have been prepared by the community associations. And for the first one, I think we'll go Rogers, Menard, Bromwich on this. Each of you will have 90 seconds to give your answer. The first question is about Lansdowne. And it reads, in June 2022, Council gave approval in principle to a $330 million proposal for Lansdowne Park. What issues do you see as most critical when the new council reviews the Lansdowne 2.0 proposal? Mr. Rogers.
Thanks very much. Well, I mean, I think we need to understand that Lansdowne 2.0 is in a form that was asked for by the city planners themselves. They were asked for a proposal. The proposal was given, and it's now essentially in the public domain. I think the most critical aspect of the whole process is that before we go any further, public consultations have to be undertaken. I think that it's fair to say that no decisions have been made on that development. The infrastructure is city infrastructure. There are partners. And I think that the various communities, Old Ottawa South, Ottawa East, the Glebe Annex, will all have a role to play in saying how this will be developed. There's no mention in the initial plan that I've seen that has any mention, for instance, of daycare. Is that something? But at the end of the day, I think we can agree that Lansdowne needs to be developed, that the North Stands and the arena are failing, and we have to do something. So let's make sure that when we do it right.
Mr. Menard?
Thanks very much. So, the City Council meeting did approve several things for Lansdowne, which was disappointing without having had public consultation. They approved an $8 million spend. They approved $239 million in debt authority. And they approved the concept plan, the business plan, that's going to be going forward for consultation. The reason why we can have consultation is because we pushed back at that meeting and passed 4 motions to make sure that consultation was part of the next steps, that the concept plan, the city-initiated rezoning, and the urban park and public realm plan would be discussed. But there's problems here. The transportation review of the site and transportation demand management has not been done appropriately for this site. We're talking about 3 skyscrapers that would potentially go on the site that has not been consulted on, and the plan is actually set for the financial model for those towers. It's not based on good urban realm public design. It's done the opposite way. It says, well, how do we get enough tax dollars from those 3 towers on the site to pay for ostensibly the arena and the buried infrastructure and the new stands? It doesn't make sense the way this is done. So we need to do 3 things immediately. We need to ensure a publicly driven process that incorporates a public vision as a top priority for the site, ensure a new city council fully consults citywide on the best path forward with options, and that the proposal is not solely financially tied to those corporate development interests selling off public land and taking away green space without having consulted fully with the public. So I think we got to do that in the next term of council.
Thank you. I'll repeat the question just because it's been a bit since you heard it. What issues do you see as the most critical when council reviews the Lansdowne 2.0 proposal? Ms. Bromwich.
Well, I've said this in my materials and my advertisements as well. My commitment to you is to have a full, inclusive, and proper consultation with city staff at times that are accessible to people. within 100 days of taking office, a full consultation where we really unpack the details of the plan. I want to give credit where credit is due. The incumbent did try to pass a motion that was unsuccessful to delay things. Now, he tried, and I just want to point out that it is important to build consensus around the council table, so I commit to you that I will function transparently and build trust with all stakeholders and participants in the process so that we don't have burnt bridges and we have a fresh start on that and we all work together to come up with a reasonable outcome. There are numerous different issues with respect to Lansdowne. One is the potential liability that has been raised, that the stands are crumbling, that some of the stands are not safe. Health and safety of the public is the top priority of government. We cannot leave things as they are. That said, we don't have to be pushed into any particular plan. There is lots of space for our stakeholders, for our residents, for our businesses to discuss what's the right deal to get on the table here. I also wanted to make clear that I will work collaboratively with OSEG, with the public, and I want to work also on those public spaces. There's a lot of cash in lieu money that is in the account that has not been spent. I don't know how much because I'm not allowed to know, but there is money that we could use to put some shade on the Great Lawn, to do some little things well.
So I have to cut you off. Mr. Menard is champing at the bit, so we'll give an opportunity for rebuttals here of 30 seconds if each of you has more to say to add to what you said before or answer something one of the other candidates said. Mr. Menard?
Thank you, and it's important for public safety. Those stands are safe. The studies that reviewed them said they are safe, they can be maintained, that it is not a safety issue. They talked about functionally obsolescence with them, but they are safe stands and people are able to be in them in a safe manner. So I just wanted to clarify that. The second thing is that we passed 4 different motions at City Council unanimously when this came forward. One was around consultation, one was around transportation review, one was around the urban realm massing and height options related to the residential, and the other was around cut-through traffic and the plan for affordable housing. So we worked collectively with the community associations on that. I'm proud of that work that we did, but this is a problem that Lansdowne, the way they consult in Lansdowne in this city is wrong. That needs to change next term of council.
Stop.
Thank you.
It's amazing how experienced politicians can keep a sentence going and going and going. Mr. Rogers, do you have more you want to say on this? I'm sure it's going to come up again in the in further questions, but on this exchange.
Yeah, well, I would just like to say that I think we can say that the North Stands are safe. It's infrastructure that's over 55 years old. The Civic Center itself was built in 1967. The infrastructure is crumbling. It may not be safe today or unsafe today, but it needs to be replaced. If it's going to be replaced and we're going to redevelop Lansdowne, then as a community, as a city, I think we need to have public consultations. We need to get it right, but I think we should all agree that it at one point is going to happen. I can say that the initial redevelopment has been very good for us as in the small business community on both sides of the bridge.
Okay. Ms. Bromwich, something to add?
Yeah, just to pick up on that, I've heard a variety of different things as I'm going around talking to people and listening to residents and stakeholders about Lansdowne. Not everybody thinks everything about it is bad, but not everybody thinks everything about it is good. That's why I've committed to a full, proper, inclusive consultation within the first 100 days. I am not at all confident in the safety. I've been told by various sources there are concerns about safety. I've worked long enough in litigation, and I'm a mom whose kids sit in those stands. I'm not comfortable with it. So I undertake to you that I will make the health and safety of our population the top priority.
Thank you. As I say, I'm sure we'll come back to Lansdowne in the course of the audience questions, but I'm going to move on to the next question proposed by the sponsors. And we'll go Rogers, Bromwich, Menard on this. And it's this. As a councillor, would you support the removal of the Alta Vista Transportation Corridor from the Transportation Master Plan? And why or why not?
Well, thanks very much. I have to plead some ignorance, in a sense, on how far we've gone down the road on the development and the idea and the plan of a transportation corridor. What I would say, and it's the same I would say on almost any development anywhere, which is the proper consultation, meeting with the communities that are affected, has to be paramount. At the same time, as the city grows, if the population growth is what the statisticians say it's going to be, we're going to have to face the fact that somewhere along the line, we're going to have to build transportation corridors to move people in and out of the city core. Where we put it, I mean, this is where planners come in. I'm not an urban planner, but I do believe that that full consultation has to be paramount in moving anything beyond sort of the idea of planning.
Thank you. Ms. Bromwich?
So I agree with some of the things that have been said with respect to subject matter expertise. So I am not going to commit one way or another on this issue. I have heard of it. I am aware of it. I know there are people that enjoy the green space there, and it is lovely to be able to play sports. Having said that, we need to think systematically about Ottawa as a city. We are all neighbors. We are one community, and we need to think about the best interests of the city as a whole as well as of our community. And that means I can't commit to withdrawing that from the overall plan. I do want to closely scrutinize what's being done, and that will involve consultation with everyone who's involved, whether it's all levels of government or subject matter experts. You know, one of the things, you know, when I was getting my PhD and also working with the Canadian Bar Association for a number of years on law reform, is I really do admire the expertise that people have in these areas. And one of my commitments in going in to office would be to make sure that I listen respectfully to the people involved, whether it's city staff or whether it's subject matter experts in another capacity. It's important that we have a dialogue that's constructive around these issues. And so I'm not going to storm in and make a giant commitment without hearing people out.
Thank you. Mr. Menard?
Well, look, I will make a commitment on this issue because it's important for our community. This is a 4-lane highway that is proposed from Conroy through a hydro area which is well used by residents in Alta Vista, over the Rideau River, through Springhurst Park, the People's Park, and connecting up with the Queensway. It's been on the books for 5 decades now. They actually built a portion of it already, which is actually underutilized at this point. We're looking at least $150 million to go over the river. The point I need to make here is that more roads does not mean less congestion, okay? Congestion continues as you build more roads. It fills up. It's the concept of induced demand. We've been talking about it a lot this City Council. This is not something that we want to put through the middle of our communities. That green space is extremely well used. And at this point, if we're talking about building this, you're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. You're talking the lack of green space, which Old Ottawa East is already suffering from a lack of green space, and they need that green space. And we're talking kids from all walks of life that use that space right now. So we should be turning that into a full public park. That AVTC has no business going over that river and through that park. In fact, if you're here today, we have a petition just on this issue over at our table. If you're interested in stopping this, taking it out of the Transportation Master Plan, acknowledging what we say is induced demand here and this doesn't work, in a climate emergency, this is not something we should be doing. So unequivocally, I'm telling you we need to stop this, and we're working on that issue now. Please do sign our petition at our table if you get a chance today.
I have a follow-up then, because to Mr. Menard, because you've taken the strong position here. How do you convince other councillors, a majority of councillors, to support your position if this is what you want?
Well, I'm really proud to say I just met with city staff on this about 2 months ago, and not on the AVT specifically, but Old Ottawa East had held a meeting. We were part of this discussion, and the issue here is they're starting to consider induced demand finally in the city. It's going to be one of the criteria that they're going to be using as part of the TMP. So finally, this concept that we've been bringing up over and over at the council table is going to be inserted into the official plan. It's going to talk about, are we next to LRT lines? Should we be expanding roads there? Should we be expanding roads through parks? Should we be doing it if there's a concept of induced demand that occurs here? So, you know, I'm proud to say that I think hopefully we'll get city staff back on side on this, and that residents need to stand up right now if that's going to happen. So,
Time. Do either of the other candidates want to take another 30 seconds? Ms. Bromwich, then Mr. Rogers, if you do.
Well, I do think it's a good question, because having strong opinions and working hard is one thing, and nobody's questioning the incumbent's strong views and his hard work. What I am questioning is the effectiveness of the effort and energy being expended. If you cannot build consensus around the council table, and there will be a lot of new faces, and nobody knows who they will be. There are 14 candidates running for mayor. We don't know who's going to win. I will work constructively with any of them. And it's important that we prioritize a functional council.
Mr. Rogers, do you want to go?
I'll just simply say, as Sean pointed out, this has been on the books for some 50 years. Again, I'm not an urban expert. Public consultation would have to be paramount before moving forward with anything. But at the same time, and we can talk about parks and we can talk about recreation and our children, but a city does have to move. Every large city has to move, and we will at some point have to figure out where we move. Is this where we move? I don't know the answer to that. But we will have to move, and rather than putting up roadblocks and saying it can't happen, I really think that what we really need to do is talk amongst communities and talk amongst each other about where we move and how
I'm going to stop you there. Thank you. For the next question posed by the community associations, we'll go just along the table, Menard, Rogers, Bromwich. It's a bit of a doozy, actually. It's about recreation. In Capital Ward, residents face high user fees for recreational services since the city continues to raise facility charges and to withdraw staff support from the community partners like OSCA, CNAG, and CAG who deliver these services. So by contrast, in suburban areas, the city's investing in large new recreational complexes with city staff to run them. So here's the question. Do you support the city's approach to providing recreational services? And if not, how should it be changed? Mr. Menard.
It's a great question. It's very difficult right now because we have fantastic community associations here with incredible activity groups that run here. They need to be supported. They need to be supported well. And so we're not seeing that all the time from city staff. Even the new Des Châtelet building that's coming together, the city is proposing to run that facility. Now, the benefit is that the old town hall will be maintained in Old Ottawa East, and CAG will continue to run that program. But we need to support our local activity groups with strong community associations in Capital Ward. They should be given that authority and the funding to do that. I'm a strong believer in actually funding community associations and activity groups directly from the city. We used to do this many, many years ago. We should be bringing that back. They're our best allies. They're the ones who help us with issues. They're volunteers. They give their time for free to make a better city, and we should be funding that. I can think of a lot better things to spend money on than, say, developer subsidies for brownfields. Things like this would go a long way, is actually funding our community associations.
Thank you. Mr. Rogers?
I don't disagree with anything Sean has said. What I can say from my own perspective as a small business person in the Glebe is that my small business on an annual basis provides funding to GNAG that we raise through some of the activities that we run in our small business. We have a fantastic relationship with them. But certainly, these centers across the city should be funded by the taxpayer of Ottawa.
Thank you. Ms. Bromwich.
Well, I've said in my campaign materials that I want to help Capital Ward get our fair share. And so this user fee issue is a big part of that. I know that Heron Park and Old Ottawa East lack infrastructure with respect to their community association buildings. The Glebe and Old Ottawa South have the infrastructure, but they need support to expand community programming, so you do need these services. We're all invested in improving community resources across the city, and it's important, particularly in an inflationary environment, particularly when we're looking at the prospect of potentially tax raises, which I want to continue to commit to keeping low as compared to what I have heard is being promised by the incumbent. It's important that we work together to negotiate appropriate services, appropriate resources, and infrastructure being made available to the community here in Capital Ward. I would be committed to making sure that we get our fair share.
Thanks. Would any of you like to rebut or add or amplify? Mr. Menard?
I should. I mean, that this candidate has unfortunately been saying that we want to raise taxes by 13% and increase taxes everywhere, and that is just not the case. And so we've regularly proposed redistribution of funds within the city. And we've talked about things like where the taxes are now, we can keep them there if we're redistributing funds. Where I think we need to move away from is the lazy and unequal method of budget allocation where everyone gets 3%, benefiting the already larger budgets in the city to a much greater degree instead of reviewing those budget lines line by line and differentiate based on priorities. So we want to keep taxes where they are.
Time.
Thank you.
Mr. Rogers, do you want to crack at this? No? Ms. Bromwich, do you want to have another 30 seconds?
Well, since the incumbent has raised the issue of taxes, I did want to explain where the calculations of my team come from on that. The incumbent has promised free transit from the time that he was running in 2018. We don't have free transit, but he has promised it. He has not backed away from that promise, at least to my knowledge, and if he is going to back away from it, then why is he backing away from his commitment there? There is an alternative budget that the incumbent is associated with that would increase, it would be necessary to increase taxes. What has been calculated with respect to free transit, it would cost an additional 13% tax increase, and then there's also this
I'm going to
land
stop you there.
transfer tax that has
And
been
if you want to come
proposed.
back to the land transfer tax in a future answer, I suppose you can. I'm going to drag this back, though, to the concrete on this subject, and I'll go in the same order. How can the city be convinced to invest in improvements to the recreational infrastructure at Brewer Park in particular? Mr. Bernard?
Yeah, there's a big $50 million project that's needed at Brewer Park. The nice thing about Brewer, it's classified as a citywide park. And so there's cash in lieu of parkland funding citywide that can be allocated to that park. There's been some great design plans worked up for Brewer. You've seen the aging facilities that exist there right now. So there's been discussions happening with, Carleton University about what kind of a 50-meter pool could come in, the basketball facilities, indoor basketball facilities there. We've seen the aging rink. And so there's a big need for Brewer Park to be renewed. We've committed for this next term of council because we've been working hard on many other parks. This is a park that needs that investment this next term of council. And we're going to make sure that there's cash in lieu funding from the citywide accounts that go into that fund. This is a park that is used for things like when there's emergencies. So you've seen it being used for 2 years for COVID response. I thank the residents of Old Ottawa South who have endured a lot of new traffic and neighbors from across the city that have had to be there for testing and safety. But this is a park that we all need to invest in, and I know our parks and recreation staff are committed to it. We need to make sure that we're getting that done in the next term of council with firm commitments and a full rebuild with public consultation on what Brewer can look like.
Thanks. Mr. Rogers, how do you get more city money to improve Brewer Park?
Let me just start by saying, as a kid, I used to play hockey at Brewer Park. So I'm familiar with it, and it's probably the exact same rink today as it was when I played there like 40 years ago. If you build a city, you have to look after its infrastructure. Parks, recreation, roads, bike paths. It's part and parcel of what we do and how we build communities. As Sean said, if there's money in the system to look after it, well, then let's get it done. Let's have a consultation with what it should look like, who it should service, what it should service, whether there's partnerships with Carleton University or not. I don't know. I'm not privy to those conversations. But certainly, that would be an aspect worth looking into.
Ms. Bromwich?
Yeah, so Brewer Park is, my kids are sitting over there. They all went to Westboro Academy. They're not all here, but went to Westboro Academy. That was when it was located right by Brewer Park. So I'm very familiar with the area and with the splash pad and the oval and all of that, those aspects of it. It is so important, as Mr. Rogers has said, to if you're going to build a city, you've got to take care of the infrastructure. So there definitely need to be improvements. In terms of where the money would come from, there is cash in lieu money. So cash in lieu of parkland money that is sitting in a bank account that is allocated already for this ward that actually has really been underused by the incumbent. So there actually is money available to do that. Consultation is really important to do. We should be looking at other funding sources as well. Collaboration with Carleton University is a wonderful idea. As I said, I teach at Carleton in the Sprott School of Business. It's where I did some of my studies, my PhD. My kids go to the camps there, and I would be very happy to be working with the administration, collaboratively with all levels of government, municipal, provincial, and it wouldn't concern federal as much, and Carleton University, to innovate and to build a better space for our community and for our kids and for our pets and for our elderly people and for our families at Brewer Park. But there is money to do it. It just hasn't been done.
We're going to move on from that because we have another question from the sponsoring organizations and then the first set of questions from the crowd. For this one, we'll go down the table. We'll go Bromwich, Rogers, Menard. And the question is this. How do you reconcile the need for more housing within the city and Capital Ward with the desire to maintain neighborhood character? How and where should housing be developed to meet demand? Ms. Bromwich.
Look at all my notes, you guys. All right, so it's important to be balancing creativity with character, with history, and with the innovation that we can have. So the city needs to work with new housing development, so we end up having mixed housing, so there is affordability, so that communities are supported. An example that's nearby is Somerset House, and also some of the work that's been done at Lansdowne, not in the OSEG part of the property, but in the public part of the property, with respect to the Aberdeen Pavilion and the horticultural building. Those need more work. But there has been a strong effort made to preserve those areas, and that's the type of approach that I would like to see taken, whereby people are working to maintain the character and the history and the historic value of the properties while we are updating and while we are intensifying the urban area. I want to see an intensified, greener, more accessible, safer Capital Ward.
Thank you. Mr. Rogers, how and where should housing be developed to meet demand in Capital Ward?
Well, let me simply start by saying that if we all agree that climate change is an issue, then intensification and infill is necessary, is unquestionable. Where do we intensify? I mean, I think we can say, I would say that there is room for intensification at Lansdowne. There is room for intensification along Bank Street. I think that as we intensify, the guiding principles have to be that what we do cannot negatively impact the neighborhoods that we're building in. But if we're going to look at the notion of a 15-minute neighborhood where people can walk to get to whatever they need, then we will intensify all through the ward. But again, the various neighborhoods have to be consulted, and we have to do it in a thoughtful and progressive way.
Thank you for that. Mr. Menard, your turn.
Yeah, and I would agree with a lot of that. Those are good comments. I think, I feel proud that the Glebe Community Association, builders, our office, city staff worked on something called the Glebe Heightened Character Study. And though it wasn't perfect, at the end of the day, we all took some water in our wine, but it laid out where intensification should occur, how it would occur in the Glebe, where affordable housing could go in the Glebe, and we came to a comprehensive solution through collaboration and passed that through Planning Committee and City Council. So I thank the Glebe Community Association for doing that, and it shows, here's where we want to have height in our community, here's where we want to have businesses fronting, here's where we want to have mixed-use centers, and affordable housing. And so that's the way we have to do that. In the next term of council, the comprehensive zoning bylaw review is going to come in. And so that's going to be implementing the official plan that's not been yet approved by the province. The comprehensive zoning bylaw review, by about 2024, 2025, will talk about how each neighborhood should develop. It's going to be important for us to get involved in that conversation. If we want development to happen on our main streets, in our corridors, we want business like corner stores and businesses within our communities, that's one of the places to do it. I feel proud about what we've done on places like Riverside and Bank, where yes, there's new development coming, but we've got 3 towers going up there, but the problem there has been the transportation, the issues with affordable housing. And so we have Billings Bridge to Walkley fully being redeveloped on Bank Street. Next year, it's starting that project. And so without those transportation changes that we push for on Billings Bridge and the rest of Bank Street, those developments wouldn't have made sense with the 100 accidents we have a year at each of those Bank and Riverside intersections.
I'm going to move on actually to one of the questions from the audience that is a natural follow to this. And it's also about housing, but specifically about homelessness. And the question is, we'll go down the table again, what would you push the city to do to support people experiencing homelessness today? Ms. Bromwich.
Well, clearly we have a major problem with homelessness in our community. In fact, I think demographically per capita, we have one of the highest homeless rates in Canada. We need to bolster and support social programs to enable people who are street involved or who are experiencing homelessness to find pathways out of that experience. We also need to have more affordable housing built and to work collaboratively with those folks who are going to be building it in order to ensure that it is possible to house people. It is incredibly hard to obtain housing in Ottawa. The average price of a home is somewhere in the neighborhood of $600,000 to $800,000. People starting off in life, it's very, very difficult to find a home. People who are experiencing homelessness have a great deal of difficulty being able to pay rent. So financial affordability of housing and the issue of homelessness are deeply connected issues. We also need to look again at social programs and how we ensure that they are accessible and that they are effectively delivered. And that involves working collaboratively with the provincial government, and to some extent because the National Capital Commission is involved with respect to the parkways, we need to be working collaboratively with the federal government as well with the National Capital Commission and looking at remedies for that. So to make life more affordable in Ottawa and also to support social programs, because there actually are a lot of great people doing a lot of great things in this community. And I've been involved with a number of NGOs like COSA, Circles of Supporting Accountability Ottawa, which involves, supports long-term dangerous offenders who've been labeled dangerous as they are reintegrated into society. There are lots of supports available, lots of great people doing great work, and it's important we support them.
Thank you. Mr. Rogers. What would you push the city to do as councillor to support people experiencing homelessness today?
Well, I mentioned earlier that I have a business on Bank Street, which is about 315 feet east of us. And you don't have to walk too far in either direction on Bank Street to see the human wreckage that's been left in the wake of alcoholism, drug addiction, mental health crisis, homelessness, and poverty. We live in one of the wealthiest communities in the country. This can't be viewed as acceptable to me. Climate change, housing affordability, and transit are issues that are important, but what kind of a community are we if we don't stand up for what is right for everyone? There was a time when we waged a war on poverty, not on poor people. I acknowledge that the city has taken positive steps by joining the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness, adopting a housing first strategy, as did Finland, now on track to end homelessness by 2027. I think that these are great first steps, but we can't take our foot off the gas. There's a lot of people who need an awful lot of help.
Mr. Bernard?
Thank you very much. We need to give people that are living on the street, chronically houseless folks, the 1,300 was the last point in time count done by the city, people that are chronically homeless, homes. We need to give them supportive housing. And so we invest a very, very small amount in the city. It's $15 million annually. That's the record spend for the city. And we're leaving money on the table from the federal and provincial governments who are now reinvesting in this priority. We need to make sure we're finding funds within the city to make sure we're getting those matching dollars. Some of the areas where we could find those funds is to stop the developer subsidies that we are providing in tax breaks through brownfield grants, which, you know, in the last decade, it's been more than $70 million. Start to shift that towards this priority. Stop road widening on our DC priorities. We have huge road widening projects. One project in Barrhaven, Strandherd Road, $113 million with a track separation. That's unacceptable. We need to, that's 6 times what our annual affordable housing investment is. So we need to find ways to reallocate, shift funds within the budget towards affordable housing. For me, widening a road is not more important than affordable housing. I think the way Mr. Rogers put it, if we're serious about this, then we need to get serious on our priorities around the issue. In Capital Ward here, on Carling Avenue, at Chamberlain and Bank, the Deschâtelet building, we've negotiated in new developments. There's a new affordable housing fund that we've started here as well. Much more needs to be done, but we're committed to it in this ward.
Thank you for that. You actually touched on the subject for our next question, and we'll go Menard, Bromwich, Rogers on this. And it has to do with transportation and transit, which has been preoccupying our mayoral candidates, I think the last couple of days particularly. And I'll just put it simply, what are your priorities for the city when it comes to transportation and transit?
Thank you for that. On transportation, I mean, I'm a strong proponent in transforming our streets. I believe in street patios, the transformations to wider sidewalks. I believe in bike lanes. I want to see seasonal redesigns, a healthy tree canopy that doesn't just rely on car culture. And I think Ottawa needs a bike share program. I think we need to fix the roads that we've got. The pathways and lanes that already exist in Ottawa, and instead of widening new roads, which only adds to the same amount of congestion after we widen them. I think we need to activate our waterways. We've got a huge asset in Canal, and we need to have those types of inlets and docks. That's why we've invested in more docks in Capital Ward. You've seen what we've done with the Bank Street Bridge. We just funded Bank Street south of Billings Bridge in the last budget. These are the sorts of things that we need to do, the new 30-kilometer-an-hour speed limits. On transit, there are several things we need to do. We need to reorient those suburbs to downtown routes. We need to make sure that Paratranspo is well funded and start to charge Uber and Lyft more so that accessible taxis become an option again. And on, I'll just mention on free transit, we did pass a study unanimously at council that said we want to source a study, bring back the parameters of what the study would look like, but that was passed unanimously at City Council because we've gone through COVID, it's not done yet, and we have a lot of changes to our transportation system. So we need that study to look at free transit options, lower cost options, and of course more reliability for our transit service like we've seen on the 7, the 6, and what we want to do with the 10 on Bronson.
Thank you. Ms. Bromwich.
Well, several decades ago, Ottawa had an award-winning transit system. We don't anymore. It has not kept pace with the times. We need to improve our transit infrastructure. That is my first priority around transit. One of the things that has been done recently that's really positive is the institution of new electric buses, and that's a provincial municipal collaboration. That was in the last city budget. And I will point out, because the incumbent voted against the city budget, he actually voted against the electric buses. So it's important to note that when you're voting against things like the budget and you're not pulling things out, which you can do, you're voting against things that are positive changes. So I would make sure that we would continue the electrification of buses. It's also interesting to think about hydrogen power with respect to buses. I also want to point out that I am very invested in safety in roads. I have 4 kids who are on these streets. I have 4 kids who ride transit daily. My oldest went to university, so 3 kids who are riding transit daily in this city to school, and transit safety is very important to me. Road safety is very important. The 30-kilometer-an-hour speed limit is great. So is the new 40-kilometer-an-hour speed limit on Queen Elizabeth Driveway, which is where I live. Having said that, the 30-kilometer-an-hour speed limit that Mr. Menard, the incumbent, is taking credit for is provincial legislation. That was a provincial legislative change. And as a result, enforcement of that is an issue that needs to be looked at. When I walk around and I'm talking to people, I've been to every community that you people represent. I have heard from so many people that there's a problem with speed enforcement. So safety of our community is my top priority.
Mr. Rogers.
Well, as a former transportation guy, I love transportation. It affects every single person, every single day. How we get to work, how we get to play, how we get to visit our friends, whether we walk, ride, bike, whatever, however we get there. Transit and transportation are central to how we live our lives. We've had some cock-ups with the LRT. I think maybe we have moved beyond the point where recrimination is necessary, and we should really set about looking forward and fixing it. Let's get the right trains for a northern climate city. That might be a good start. Sean has talked about active transportation. I mean, the one thing I guess that I have some problems with is I know that Sean supports a program to borrow $250 million over the next 4 years to build bike lanes. I just don't see it. I mean, at some point, transportation is expensive. There's no doubt about that. And when we pick and choose how we move about, we have to do it very carefully. At the end of the day, we will have to say at what cost. because there is no such thing as free transit. When you get on the bus and look at the bus driver, someone's paid him. Thank you.
Apparently somebody wants 30 seconds to rebut, and
Great.
the other two will get a chance if you want it as well. Mr.
So yeah,
Menard?
just to correct the record on a few things on electric buses. I mean, I was the one who pushed to get that into our term of council priorities. There was a separate vote on electric buses, and I fought for that at the table, and we voted in favor of electric buses along with Catherine McKenney. On the 30 kilometers an hour, that was our team that did that. We did it methodically with what we did within the budget for every single community in Capital Ward, and I'm proud of that initiative. In terms of money in the budget for in the future for cycling infrastructure, I do support that. We've got a certain amount we spend on cycling infrastructure every single year, and the idea is let's borrow those funds that can be paid back by what we allocate every single year and build that infrastructure. Right now, we spend $113 million on one road. Our roads are extremely expensive. Cycling saves us money. It gets people out of their cars in a climate emergency, and we need to be supporting that objective here. So just
Thank you.
a few things.
Would it, either of the other two, like 30 seconds? Ms. Bromwich and then Mr. Rogers.
Okay, just to be clear, the incumbent, Mr. Menard, voted against the city budget in its entirety for the last 2 years. Many of the things that are in the Glebe report as accomplishments during council are things that are actually from that budget that were, oh, that was loud, right? He's taking credit for things that were in those budgets that he voted against. With respect to free transit, I completely agree with Mr. Rogers. There is no such thing as a free lunch, basically. There's no such thing as free transit. It's a question of who pays for what. As I said, my kids ride transit. There are lots of good reasons to have discounted transit at particular times for particular categories of people. I certainly don't need free transit, and so we should have a nuanced and thoughtful approach and dialogue around this.
Mr. Rogers?
Thank you. I guess what I would say on Sean's comment of borrowing money about money that's already set aside for future bike lanes is that about 3 weeks ago, the Governor of the Bank of Canada raised our central bank rate by 75 points. Yesterday, the United States Fed raised it by 75 points, and next month, the Bank of Canada will raise it again. The money that we might think is there 4 years from now may very well not be there 4 years from now. As we sit here today, we have to look forward, and we have to make sure that the choices that we make are sound fiscal choices that we can afford to make, because there's nothing worse than spending money that we don't have because we don't really know what's around the corner.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to the next question, which also sort of ties into this. It's about climate change. And the question is, what do you think the city should be doing as a government to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from this area, not just in its own operations, but using its powers to influence emissions from the population? We'll go Rogers, Bromwich, Menard for this.
Well, I think it was a year or 2 years ago that the city of Ottawa declared climate change an emergency and came out with a plan moving forward. I agree with every aspect of that plan. The city does have plans for re-engineering its bus fleet to hybrid and electric. I'm assuming that its corporate car fleet is the same. There has been conversations about how we deal with waste, making sure that our tree canopy is supported and built on. It goes on. I think that the city on climate change is on the right track. But public education and keeping at it, like everything else in public education, it's going to be paramount.
Thank you. Ms. Bromwich?
So, maybe little known fun fact about me. This is not my first rodeo in talking about climate change and the environment. I was 27 years old when I first ran for office federally as a Green Party candidate in 2004. I'm deeply committed to thinking about the environment, working on it. There actually has been a lot of money expended, a lot of work expended on climate change in this city and otherwise. As has been indicated, there is a city climate change plan. It needs to be renewed in 2025. So we're looking at implementing what's existing there and also also renewing that commitment and continuing to improve our climate change work. And I would want to work collaboratively and respectfully with public servants who work for the city, as well as with all other levels of government. When we're talking about the environment and climate change, we have to all work together. Things that are concrete, things we can address are the tree canopy, make sure we have a greener city. Transit and transportation are important issues that impact our footprint with respect to climate. Thinking about the Rideau River, Dow's Lake, the canal, having clear water flowing through those areas, having a healthy environment. We need to do one job right. Also, business innovation is connected to environmental sustainability. We have innovation hubs at Carleton. I teach at the Sprott School of Business. We have all kinds of entrepreneurs who can help be part of the solution here. Sustainable entrepreneurship, sustainable businesses, environmental and social responsibility on the part of the private sector as well as the public sector. We need to be collaborating with the private sector as well as the public sector, with small business as well as big business, and implementing the work that's already being done. We can call it a climate emergency, and it is, but it's not news. This has been ongoing for a long period of time. As I said, it was 20 years ago that I ran as a Green Party candidate.
Gave you time to come full circle on that. Mr. Menard.
I like the flexibility. That's great. Thank you for that. I want to make sure that people know that the climate emergency that was passed in this city came from this ward. It was this ward that organized to get the climate emergency. It came. Our office passed it through Environment Committee and then through City Council, and that has led to important take-ups in the official plan, the Transportation Master Plan to come, and it has meant that we've developed a great plan. That plan, though, needs to be funded properly, and we need to fund it by doing things that we're not doing now. So right now, we continue to sprawl in the city. It's $465 per person per year every time we sprawl out. We need to stop that. It's deleterious for our finances and horrible for our farmland and our environment. We need to retrofit our buildings. You can save money by retrofitting buildings. There's a 7 to 10-year payback. Our community buildings and our buildings within the ward need to be retrofitted, and it saves us money over time. We need to phase out our gas-powered lawn equipment, divest from fossil fuels in the city, which we also passed a motion on, and we also passed a motion on our tree canopy, moving distinctive trees from 50 centimeters at the base height to 30 centimeters as a distinctive tree. Now, there's much more we need to do. We need to have flyovers to make sure that we're assessing our loss of tree canopy here and have real targets with teeth to make sure that we're rectifying that when we're seeing that loss of canopy. We've been experiencing it in the core. And so trees are extremely important. Our park space is important to make sure that we're not losing park space for more roads, for example, like the AVTC. So, I've been very committed. I'm the vice chair of the Environment Committee. And we've worked collaboratively with the chair, Scott Moffat, and all of council to make sure that these motions have passed through City Council. We need to do a lot more as a council, though, to reach our targets for 2030 and 2050.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to the next subject, and I'm going to break this question up into two with maybe 60 seconds for each answer. I'll ask the first question to each of you and then the second one. And it has to do with policing. And we'll go Bromwich, Menard, Rogers on this. And the first question is, what's your diagnosis of what happened with policing in Ottawa during the convoy protests?
That's the question?
Yep.
Okay, so with respect to policing, I think all first responders in Ottawa are important to our communities. It's important to have ambulances that come on time. It's important to have firefighters that arrive on time. It's important that if, as a single mom with my 4 kids, if I call 911, it's important that someone comes. If there's an intruder in my home, it's important that someone responds to that. Police are part of that solution. I have, as I said, a PhD. I've worked as a lawyer. I've worked as a Crown attorney. I believe that policing can constructively be part of a solution. We are looking at new recruits to the police service in Ottawa. That is the most diverse class of recruits, and some of them are my former students who are coming in, and what we need to do is improve policing in our city. We need to dilute some of the problems that have been happening. Yes, there have been problems with policing. Yes, there are questions that have been raised about what happened with respect to the convoy, and police response was obviously very imperfect. I had convoy trucks parked in front of my house. It was absolutely terrifying. They were in front of my house, and as I said, I'm a single mom, and I was scared. and I shouldn't have had to be scared. And if anybody else was in that situation and you were afraid, that shouldn't have happened. Our trust was betrayed. We need to restore that trust. I also do want to say, though,
I'm going
that
to
at the
cut
end,
you off because there's going to be another round with this sort of thing.
okay, I really do have something else to say.
That you should have said it in the time you had.
Well,
But there will be more.
I would encourage
So,
people
Mr.
to
Rogers,
ask me.
Mr. Rogers, what's your diagnosis of what happened with policing during the convoy protests?
Let me just start by saying, again, in my former life as a political aide in a federal office, I worked for a fellow by the name of Herb Gray, who was the Solicitor General at the time. And it's just never a good thing when politicians tell the police what to do. The end of story. However, as we witnessed, when the police don't fulfill their duty to the public they serve, something's got to happen. Last winter, the response by the OPS was and is unacceptable. I think we've seen the fallout from that. But I think that we've also seen that in the subsequent protests of motorcycles through the city streets, the disruptions that took place, the police handled it very well. And I think they've clearly learned some lessons, and I'm encouraged by that.
Thank you. Mr. Menard, what happened last winter?
Yeah, thank you. I think we started off with some very mixed messaging. We heard the police chief at one point call it remarkably peaceful, but also that they didn't want to take action because they were worried about violence and weapons in the vehicles. We saw, I think, there was some sympathy as well in OPS, and we've seen that come out now with the reports that have followed with some officers. I also think that there was direct orders being provided that weren't being listened to as well by some of the rank and file. And you read that story about when they were in that hotel ready to act, and it was called off, and it was called off because it seemed like there was inside information being passed along. So, I was on the front lines every day, walking with Catherine McKenney in the Corps, safety walks. We were at Billings Bridge. I was one of the first 20 people at Billings Bridge. They didn't act until we started to take action as a community. We supported each other during that time. And unfortunately, that's the sort of thing that, communities keep each other safe, and that's what we had to do during that time. And it's unacceptable what happened there. And I really, we pushed City Council for bylaw changes during that time as well, but they were unwilling to act until I think community folks started to push back and say, we're going to stand up for Ottawa and not take that anymore.
Thank you. So the second question then, and we'll go in the same order, and it's a question that goes beyond what happened during the convoy protests. What should we do with the budget for the police? Ms. Bromwich.
Well, one of the important aspects of the answer to that question is, what do we have the authority to do? So as City Council, we don't have the authority to defund the police. It's irresponsible to throw that word around. It's irresponsible to make it a hashtag as the incumbent did on Twitter in 2020. The City Council does not have that authority. The Ottawa Police Service is a creature of provincial statute, and it is the Police Services Board that supervises them. City Council does have the opportunity to approve the budget, that's it. Having said that, I think it's very important that the police service works more collaboratively with social services, and there is a great deal of value in that. Safety is my top priority. I did want to take up what I was about to say before, which is I don't agree with any notion that we should be on the front lines. I'm a woman, and that makes a difference with respect to what kind of expectation there should be about me going to some battle at Billings Bridge. I believe in the rule of law. I teach about the rule of law. I believe in it, and the police should be there as our first line of defense. I actually think the most dangerous thing we can do in that situation is take vigilante action. I asked my children not to go because I was afraid for their safety. And I also don't think that anybody who's in government should be taking credit for something like the Battle of the Billings Bridge. That was you. That was a community. Well done. I was proud that day. But I don't think anyone in government should be taking credit for it.
Thank you. Mr. Rogers, what should we do with the police budget?
Well, thanks very much. And like Rebecca, the notion of defunding the police, I don't think is workable. What I would say maybe is refund the police. Maybe we need to challenge them a little bit more on their business plans. Many people may or may not know that the Ottawa Police Service has a mental health unit. And as we witness up and down Bank Street, the people who could most benefit from that aren't able to get that help because the Ottawa Police Mental Health Unit consists of 4 police officers who can't work more than 5 days in a week. So, if we're going to look at how the police are funded, maybe what we should do is take a look at some of the best practices from around the world, at what police departments around the world do in dealing with some of these difficult situations. I personally think that we need to get the police out of their cars and onto the streets and onto bicycles. I think that they need to re-engage with the communities that they're sworn to protect, and I think that they need to rebuild the relationship that has been fractured over the course of the past several years.
Mr. Bernard, what should we do with the police budget?
Thank you. I mean, I'm on record as having asked to reallocate portions of the police budget, the increase that comes to City Hall, towards mental health response teams. I've done that twice now, and it's because the police mental health response team is woefully under-resourced, and it shouldn't be police that are responding to mental health resource. It should be public members that are trained for this, like we see all over North America. It saves us money with better outcomes. And, you know, in terms of refunding the police, I mean, the police budget has tripled, a little under tripled in 20 years. It has outpaced inflation and population growth. You know, I think about what we want as a society for safety. And I think about things like, why are we sending police to every traffic stop? Red light cameras can start to detask this. Automated speed enforcement can start to detask. Mental health response teams can detask those actions with much better outcomes and a much lower budget. And we're not experimenting with that in Ottawa. We need to start ensuring that the $389 million police budget doesn't just get the 3% automatically, and make sure that we're reviewing for effectiveness in terms of what we're saying we want to accomplish.
Thank you. Would anybody else like 30 more seconds? This is a big issue. Ms. Bromwich?
I did want to say, in terms of reviewing, again, the role of a city councillor, I am running for city councillor for Capital Ward. I'm not running for mayor. You see the incumbent on Twitter engaging in the mayoral campaign. I'm also not seeking to be involved in the police services board. I'm running specifically to represent this ward. And it's important that we focus on what we can do in this campaign and what we can do for the city. Now, the claim that mental health response teams have been used in places all over the United States, I would push that a little bit, because in fact they are used to some extent sometimes. But as I said, I've worked as a Crown attorney. I've been in situations where my safety's been threatened in a courtroom. You know, it's not just so simple to say that we don't need some level of law enforcement when mental health concerns are involved. There has to be a collaboration.
Mr. Rogers?
I would simply agree with Rebecca's last comment. I think mental health care workers are important. A week or so ago, I met with a psychiatrist to talk about a lot of these issues, who works at one of our local hospitals, who pointed out that the wonderful thing about the mental health unit at the Ottawa Police Service is that when these people come into a room, they don't know exactly what they're going to be dealing with. And you could have public mental health workers, you know, who you're putting at risk unknowingly. And really, the police that are trained properly understand the level of response that is necessary.
Mr. Bernard, 30 more seconds.
Thank you. We have record numbers of overdoses going on in our city. We have record numbers of houseless people. We have a lot of mental health crisis right now. And what we're seeing is the response to that often is enforcement, when we should be responding with care. It's hard to respond with care, though, if you're not investing in care and starting to shift priorities and resources to make sure that the root causes of those things are addressed directly. If we never get out of this model, we're always going to say the police response is what needs to happen for people that are homeless. The police response is what needs to happen for people that might be using drugs or having overdose. So this is not effective. And so we need to shift that model. And I think that the City Council has in fact passed a motion to start mental health response teams in Ottawa and needs to be funded appropriately. And so, I'll be pushing that the next term of council.
Thank you.
I hope the evidence is what guides us.
So the next question, it's a bit of a gear shift. It's about seniors. And the question is, what would you do to support seniors in Capital in particular better than they already are? We'll go Rogers, Bromwich, Menard.
Well, thanks very much. I mean, I think to begin with, I mentioned earlier the very tenuous economic circumstances that we live in. I think I'm getting older, and we have to make sure that our aging community aren't forced out of their houses. We need to make sure that we invest in care that takes place when people move to the next level of their lives. But more practically, I think, just in our neighborhood, I've noticed there are some infrastructure things that we can do to make their mobility much easier. I was talking to someone in the crowd earlier this evening about the new curbs that we've started building in the city that seem to drop off at a degree of 45 degrees. And I don't know how many of you have had to walk along them, but I've seen countless people who slip and fall in the winter because these are curbs that were clearly taken from some design book in Toronto and have no business in the streets of Ottawa. So I think that there's things that we can do to help mobility. I think that there's things we can do to help people stay in their houses. But I think it's an issue that we need to look more closely at as we go forward.
I hate those curbs too. It's terrible to try to walk alongside with someone who's got a stroller. And I can only imagine if you have mobility difficulties. But they were supposed to solve slippery lakes with driveways that descended. So the stuff's not easy. Mr. Menard, what should we be doing to support seniors better in this ward?
Sure. So I'll just start with the sidewalks first of all, because the city only has two types of sidewalks that they like to put out. One is called the Toronto model, which is what you were just talking about, and the other was the older model where it kind of slowly, gently slopes down. And we've been asking for a third model, and that's that sidewalks should be flat. Such a concept. Sidewalks should be flat. And at the road, you would have a curb extension at the road where cars, other vehicles can go up on them, but they should be flat otherwise. So we've been asking city staff to consider a third option for new sidewalks that come in. In terms of older adult population, we've worked so closely with groups like SWOOS, and I see Anna Kylett sitting right here, and just want to thank you for all your work that you've done in this community. We have an aging population in Capital Ward. We've talked a lot about the doctor and nursing shortage that exists here, and we actually held a full Zoom meeting just on this one topic to how we can attract more doctors and nurses. We had experts in the field in Ottawa come by as well. The Abbey Field houses that we worked to get in the Bank and Riverside Memorandum of Understanding. It's these sorts of things where there's supportive housing, there's co-living models that we need to explore. Capital Ward actually has some great co-living habitation going on. The Des Châtelet building, where we're getting seniors affordable housing going to be put in there with a mixed-use center with a school, a community center, a gym. This is the sort of collaboration that we need more of here. And so, we're committed to working with seniors groups in Old Ottawa South, the older adult population on these issues, because certainly in the next little while, this is only going to get more and more pronounced. So it's an important priority for us.
Thank you. Do you like 30 seconds to add to that?
Yes.
Sure.
Great. So when I hear about seniors, I of course think about my parents who are aging in place, and we are personally in my family building them a new home that's accessible. And so those issues are very personal to me. And I want to say hi to my mom who will watch the recording. She's not able to be here tonight, but it gave me an opportunity. So certainly accessibility and mobility on sidewalks is really important. It's also important to think about things that were mentioned in terms of co-housing and creative housing, ways to make aging in place viable and affordable, and consult with seniors about what you want, what they want with respect to aging in place, or what the best responses are for them. It is also an issue of affordability. The population, as has been noted in the Glebe and in other areas of Capital Ward, is aging at the same time that housing affordability is becoming a concern. We have an inflationary environment, interest rates are going up, housing prices have gone up upwards of 30% in the last couple of years. It's concerning whether people will continue to be able to stay in their homes. And so it's an important time for us to not be spending recklessly. I've said that sensible spending is one of my priorities, and I want to ensure that seniors in our community are able to continue to live comfortably in their homes or in whatever creative or co-housing environment they choose to live in, with the maximum autonomy that's supported for as long as possible.
Thank you. And I apologize. I was so caught up in seething about sidewalks, I lost track of who had spoken. But would anybody else now like another 30 seconds to talk about those issues? Mr. Menard?
Sure, absolutely. So just in terms of affordability, it's true. There's so many seniors that struggle right now to stay in their homes as property taxes go up. But the way you're going to get property taxes to remain at a reasonable level is by stopping sprawl, stopping the road widening, which is a giant expenditure for the city. It happens through development charges, but we need to shift those priorities. And we need to make sure that we're, not spending on things that could be reallocated towards, keeping property taxes at a reasonable level. So, I'm all for making sure that we're efficiently spending on things that actually help people, like care, like health, like public health, who also works very closely with seniors. And I just want to shout out the snow moles as well, and the work that they do in the winter. Those are winter audits that happen. We've been participating in those, and just a huge, huge service to the city, because you identify those areas where there are slips and falls, which also cost the city money, and so you're saving the city money by doing that work too. So thank you for all that work.
That's time. 30 more seconds.
On the subject of seniors and accessibility, I think we haven't yet talked about the hospital proposal for the new Ottawa Hospital, and there may be a question about that, but I thought I would welcome the opportunity to raise that. So public health and safety, again, have to be the top priority of government. They're certainly my top priority. There is a proposal that's been put forward by the provincial government to pay 90% towards this new hospital. City would be putting forward 10%. It is not wise, I think, at this point to completely backtrack on that. What we have to do is look carefully at the plan, scrutinize for how we can get the best deal on the table, have the maximum possible consultation. I know trees are an issue in the Arboretum, and also, in addition to the green cover, the particular trees. I love the Arboretum, so I sympathize with that greatly. It's important that we have a hospital that can service our ward as well as servicing the region. The catchment area for that hospital, much like is the case with CHEO, the catchment area of that hospital will be servicing the north, and it will be important to our nation as well as to our community. So it's important that we work. I say it's important a lot, I know. But we need to work together with the federal and provincial government to have the best solutions possible. Healthcare is definitely part of inclusion for seniors in our communities.
Let's stick with talking about the hospital, actually. Mr. Rogers and then Mr. Menard, as councillor, what would your top priorities and concerns be with the project?
With the new build?
With the Civic Hospital project, yeah.
Well,
And I'm sorry, let's do 60 seconds for a proper.
okay. I mean, in many respects, I agree with Rebecca. It's a huge hospital. There has been some criticism, in fact, that maybe it's too large. There's criticism about the land that it's taking from the experimental farm. It isn't going to creep into the Arboretum. To me, it makes sense to put it where it is. It is centrally located. It's near the Queensway. You've already got the helicopter facilities there. You've got the agreement of the governments. I think maybe to stop the plan now would be a mistake.
Mr. Menard, what would your top priorities and concerns be with the project?
So no one is arguing against a new hospital. We need a new hospital in Ottawa, but I think we've all talked here about the importance of consultation. The NCC did a full consultation and came up with Tunney's Pasture as the ideal location for that. Behind closed doors with no minutes and no public delegations, that was switched to be this area that is a beautiful green space with incredible trees, somewhere where there is a healing portion of Ottawa that is going to be lost. And so I voted against that site plan because it doesn't make sense to put the hospital there. It's a very long walk or stroll or roll from where the LRT station is. Tunney's Pasture would have made much more sense, and now we're in a situation where there was not proper consultation. And if we really are trying to abide by that principle, then I don't think we should be supporting the hospital in that location. I support a hospital. Here's the second thing. I don't support the city putting out funds for a provincial priority for it either. And so this is a provincial priority. It's supposed to be the province that funds it. If we're going to fund it, there's got to be infrastructure perhaps that gets funded around the hospital, but a direct contribution to the hospital, which is a provincial priority, is not in our best interest. And we need to push that back on the province, as many other municipalities have done, to say this is your responsibility to fund the
Thank you
hospital.
for that answer. For the next question, we'll go Menard, Rogers, Bromwich. And it's also a bit of a gear shift, and it has to do with the way City Hall works. What do you think needs to change, if anything, about the way City Hall has worked in the last 4 years? How should it work differently over the next 4 years?
We've talked a lot about division and consultation and collaboration up here, but if you follow City Hall, you will know that from day one, those committees that were set up by the mayor to be divisive. It was set up to ensure a vote at every single committee, a majority on those committees. It had nothing to do with your skill set. It had nothing to do with where you might be best, placed to help the city. It was about ensuring a majority vote on every single committee. And so from day one, that lack of collaboration was set up. I think despite that, we got things done. We passed motions around the Bank Street Bridge renewal. We collaborated on the West Coast Video building to get that building down. We've instituted new 30-kilometer-hour speed limits. We brought all partners together on the Des Châtelet building. We collaborated with community associations, reestablished a ward council. We brought the motion to declare a climate emergency. We secured funding for the redesign of Bank Street South and Billings Bridge, parks improvements that we've seen, and we held this city to account. We did all those things without losing our moral judgment. And we held the city to account. I say we because it's our office and it's this ward that's doing this work. It's not just me. And so we had the lessons learned around the motion on the LRT. We pushed for a public inquiry into the handling of the LRT. We did not shy away from exposing developer influence at City Hall that has existed in the city for far too long. And I'll say I get along well with the, people in the city that want to push for change. But those that don't want to push for change, I'm happy to work with them, but I'm never going to shy away from a debate and a discussion that needs to be had. I'm not for sprawl, and I won't sit there and just idly by and say we're going to sprawl. I'm not for, I'm for LRT accountability and ensuring that we have the proper transparency there, and so I'm going to push for those objectives. And so I think we've got things done in Capital Ward while also maintaining our moral judgment and authority at the council table, and I think that's the best we can really ask for, and I'm hopeful for more collaboration at the next term of council.
Thank you.
With new councillors and a new mayor.
I let Mr. Menard run a little bit, so you can take a little longer if you want as well. Mr. Rogers, then Ms. Bromwich.
Well, I mean, I think Sean pretty much said that he gets along with the people that he gets along with, and he doesn't get along with the people that he doesn't get along with. And I think that that's actually been the problem for the past 4 years. I'm not going to point fingers anywhere. I mean, I think that the committee system is the committee system. You may not like the committee system because you're not sitting on the committee that you want to sit on. That's the reality of politics, and that's how it goes. You have to roll up your sleeves and figure out a way to build consensus and figure out a way to work with people. That's what's been lacking for the past 4 years. It's one of the reasons why I'm working. When I started the evening, I said, I'm sorry to say, but City Hall is broken. And I think, with the fact that we're going to elect a new mayor, we have a chance to elect an entirely new council. And I honestly think that that's probably what needs to happen.
Thank you. Ms. Bromwich.
Well, I said at the beginning that we have an opportunity for a fresh start, and I'm here to be part of that fresh start. What you've heard the incumbent say is that he's promising there's going to be way more fighting at City Hall. He says it on his signs. He's saying that there's dysfunction, but he's saying it's everybody else's fault. And that isn't healthy. So I'm here in large part because I see that dysfunction, and I have a lot of tools and training with respect to how to solve that. And of course he's got supporters here, and I respect that. You know, of course he has strongly held views, and I respect that. But we need to work together. There's going to be lots of new faces around the council table. The incumbent has made a very clear commitment to one mayoral candidate. I have said I will work with any of the mayoral candidates. I'm not running for mayor. I'm running for councillor of Capital Ward. And that means that I am prepared to do the job. And the job of that role is to work collaboratively with everyone around the council table. It's not called a city council debate. It's called a city council meeting. And I've sat in many meetings, whether they're in business, whether around the faculty table, whether they're a meeting with you know, a mediation session or negotiation. There's a different tone that belongs at a meeting as opposed to a debate. And the way that municipal government is set up in Ottawa does not involve political parties, and it also does not involve the kind of vitriolic debate that we have been seeing. And frankly, that's what I saw in a Zoom meeting, and that's why I'm here. So I want to be part of a fresh start.
Thank you. Mr. Rogers, Mr. Bernard, do you want to say more on the subject?
Yeah, I mean, I just say, you know, the slogan on our sign is very much about sometimes you need to push to get things done. You need to fight internally sometimes to get things done. The Bank Street Bridge, people said that that wasn't going to happen, couldn't happen, and we got it done because we pushed to make sure that it got done. The climate emergency, same thing. It was not going to be passed. We had to push internally to get staff on board, to get councillors on board. You know, and so I'm prepared, of course, to work with any mayoral candidate that might be elected, but I'm also not going to sit this one out. This is the most important election in a generation. I've worked with Catherine McKenney for 4 years on affordable housing, on the convoy occupation, and I know that if we're going to have change in this city, there's one change candidate there, and that is Catherine McKenney.
Mr. Rogers, do you have more to add?
Well, listen, I mean, you know, it's not a mayoralty debate here, and Sean, I guess, can support who he wants to support. I mean, one question I might ask Sean is that if he were to win, would he serve 4 years, or in 2 years from now, when we move into the next federal election, would he decide that it's time to move on to greener pastures? And I think that's a fair question. I'm running to be the councillor for Capital Ward, to spend the next 4 years working for the council, or working for the ward, sorry.
There was a direct question there. I'll let you answer it, Mr. Bernard.
Yeah, I mean,
Are you in for 4 full years, or do you have other ambitions?
Well, I guess I'll just say that I've spent my entire life, I read you my bio at the beginning of this, that is etched in community. I would go to community associations when I wasn't on community associations. I would, you know, be part of those conversations at the local level. My commitment is to this ward. That's why I'm running here again. And my commitment is to stay for 4 years as the Capital Ward councillor. And that's what I've done for the last 4 years. I'm pretty sure we went through a federal election in the last 4 years. And I'm here. And I care about this community and want to help support people here. So that's where I am.
Thank you. We have time for, I think, 2 more questions. The next one is about public-private partnerships, about which we have learned quite a bit the last few years. We'll go Rogers, Bromwich, Menard on this. And it's actually sort of a kind of a knowledge question. What do you see as the advantages and disadvantages of public-private partnerships? What's good about them, and what do you have to watch out for?
Well, I think the public-private partnership is it's a great way for a city that is cash-strapped to raise money. I think that if we look at, let's just take a look at Lansdowne as an example. I mean, the city doesn't have the money to spend on the redevelopment. So you work with partners. You work collaboratively. You do your due diligence. You speak to your communities. But with a partnership, the city has the capacity to reap the rewards of a broadened tax base without suffering through some of the risk that takes place in the building that will happen, in a nutshell.
Thank you. Ms. Bromwich?
Well, in our community, we need to build bridges, both literally and metaphorically, and public and private partnerships are part of what we need to do for that. And so they're necessary. The city's not a developer. And one of the reasons we have cash in lieu money in the bank account for this ward is because that is provided by developers. It's cash in lieu of parkland. There are lots of benefits to be derived from public-private partnerships. Having said that, we need to be cautious, we need to be vigilant, we need to negotiate collaboratively with the private sector as well as with all levels of government. But it's important to stop vilifying people who are community leaders in our city, who are involved in these private sector organizations, who want the best city that they believe in. That we need to start thinking the best of people and working collaboratively with them and being vigilant and doing our due diligence. But the type of sentiment about how, developers are somehow horrible people is just not fair. And these are members of our communities. We are one city, we are communities, we are neighbors. These are our neighbors who work in the private sector, and we can work better together.
Thank you. Mr. Menard?
I mean, it's not about the people, it's about the policies that are enacted, and we've seen developer influence, I think, wreak havoc when it comes to things like trees or the speculation for sprawl. But back to the topic about public-private partnerships. The top 3 debts in the city are all public-private partnerships. LRT Stage 2, LRT Stage 1, and Lansdowne Park. Lansdowne Park was supposed to return over $100 million to the city in a public-private partnership. Guess how much is returned? Put up your hand if you know. Just put it, yeah, that's right, 0. I see Anthony in the background there. He knows. And so, this is the sort of thing that, we're promised something, there's a bait and switch, and we end up with a project that doesn't work well. And so I'm not, it's just, universally to say no public-private partnerships ever again. The city has a whole bunch of them, right? But the big ones that we've been seeing over and over again, they're not delivering results for us. We're signing 30-year deals, and part of the problem, to David's question, is we're not taking into account the risks. And they say, oh, it transfers risks to the private sector. Sorry. On the LRT, we're paying huge legal risks right now that were not accounted for in the public-private partnership. The one line that I've been hearing the mayor and other people bring out about this is that, oh, well, if we didn't have the P3, the sinkhole costs would have gone to the taxpayers. Absolutely false. In any design build, there are parameters set up in those design builds to protect the people that are procuring the project, in this case, the city. It doesn't matter if it was a design build, or in the case of a P3, a design build, finance, maintain, operate, right? So we would have been protected regardless of the P3 and regardless of that project agreement for the sinkhole. I just think there's a lot more. We're spending a lot of, I don't know if I'm out of time here, but we're spending a lot of money right now on that P3. The loss of confidence in the LRT as a result of signing that 30-year deal, I think, and without having the actual proper execution of it, when they knew there was failures. I see Joanne Keneal in the crowd too. There's failures in the testing phase. They didn't tell the public about those things, and we are where we are because there's a lack of transparency.
I'm going to have to stop you.
And a lack of accountability with P3s.
Mr. Rogers, Ms. Bromwich, do you want to take a little more time?
Well, I don't think that there's going to be any argument from anyone up here that the LRT build was a bit of a fiasco. When Sean says they, I mean, really, the city was a partner. So at a certain point in time, the city will have to take some responsibility for what went wrong. If testing wasn't as it said it was, one has to wonder what the city was doing. So it's easy to point the blame at everyone else, but I think it's fair to say in this particular issue, there's no shortage of blame to go around.
Ms. Bromwich?
Well, I think that's a fair point. Certainly, the only person who has a record on the LRT issue is the incumbent. He's the only one who was there. We need to do better. We need to be more vigilant. I will be very interested in all the recommendations from the LRT inquiry. I will strive to implement all of them when in office, keeping in mind that I was not around the council table when things went wrong there. I intend to do things right. In terms of public-private partnerships, going back to the original question, just to reiterate, it is crucial and vital that we collaborate. We cannot not partner with the private sector, but we need to do it right and we need to do it well.
Thank you very much. The last question, and then we will have your closing statements. And this is intensely local. It's about the closure of Queen Elizabeth Drive to car traffic for active use. Got to pick my words carefully when I describe that, I realize. The question is, do you think that the experiments that the NCC has tried at different times have been successful? Would you push it forward, or do you think we've had enough? Ms. Bromwich, Mr. Rogers, Mr. Menard.
So I live on Queen Elizabeth Drive, so I've had an opportunity to scrutinize this up close. And with the closures, one of the things that my neighbors have said to me, and I've talked to people about as I'm walking along or biking along, is there hasn't been a proper identification of the three categories of users, so cyclists and pedestrians and vehicle traffic. And we have to be redesigning the roads to accommodate all of that. The experiment with closing the road was great during COVID when people were out walking. It was actually a wonderful opportunity to see my neighbors, to see our friends. After the lockdowns, and of course COVID's not over, but after the lockdowns ended, I was able to firsthand observe that there wasn't a huge take-up or usage of that. Also, there wasn't signage, at least for the vast majority of the time, stating that some of those pathways should be pedestrians and some should be cycling pathways, and that's something we need to differentiate. When I've been walking around talking to people who live on Queen Elizabeth Driveway or on the streets off it, going into the glebe, there's been concerns about bicycles not adhering to road laws. So it's not just motor vehicles, but it's also bicycles that need to have that enforceability and some of those traffic calming measures there. If we're going to close Queen Elizabeth Driveway long term, we have to properly look at how to do it. We can't just put up folding, pylons. We have to think about ourselves as a G7 city and a capital city and do it in a mindful, long-term way. We also need to think about some of the issues people have noted with respect to traffic and parking and the small businesses that Mr. Rogers has pointed out. I mean, he's part of that business community. What is in the best interests of everybody? So it's not just about closing the road and putting up pylons. We have to think very mindfully and long-term about all of the categories of users and also the stakeholders, the businesses, and the community members and the neighbors.
Thank you. Mr. Rogers.
Well, I would simply say that to close Queen Elizabeth Drive permanently would be a terrible mistake. First of all, there are only two access points to Lansdowne Park. One of them is Bank Street, the other is Queen Elizabeth Drive. Secondly, as anybody from this neighborhood will know, that when they closed down Queen Elizabeth Drive, the traffic that moved through Pretoria Avenue and down O'Connor and up First Avenue, Second Avenue, Third Avenue, through the avenues and through the neighborhood was unwieldy. The Parkway is one continuous piece of traffic that moves off. And again, I say, before Lansdowne was developed, it hosted something in the neighborhood of 300,000 people a year. The year before the pandemic, Lansdowne hosted 4 million people. So to close down one of only two routes to get into it, I just have to say it would be a tragic mistake.
Thank you. Mr. Menard?
Thank you. So a couple things. People have emailed us saying that they missed the Colonel By bike days that used to exist there, and with the recent piloting, they've switched it over to QED, and so the Colonel By bike days went away, and so that's one piece I would just pass along is that, the NCC, I think, should look at bringing that back. The second thing I'll just say is that there needs to be a lot more consultation on things. Oftentimes we're finding that the NCC will just make a change without necessarily fully talking to us about it. And so I think Mr. Rogers is right about some of the repercussions that we've seen, because our office has been getting a lot of emails saying, okay, O'Connor traffic, and there's ways to mitigate these things, right? So if you talk in advance, you can say, yeah, we can open this up and pilot this project, but talk with us so we can work with the city to mitigate the issues that have been coming up. But on the whole, when you look at this from a larger perspective, does it not make sense that during COVID, during these times, especially in a climate emergency, that we start to pilot this on these streets? The beautiful canal that we have, the access you know, Toby Nussbaum is saying that we've seen more people use it with active transportation, walking, biking, and rolling, than we're using it with cars during some of those periods. So I'm very happy they've been piloting this. Now they need to listen to feedback about what side they may continue with, what are the repercussions. We've certainly spoke with Lansdowne about some of the repercussions there, but we've also seen some days work extremely well with people walking and biking up, depending on the event at Lansdowne. So I'm all for piloting these sorts of things. We need more road conversions into active transportation and start piloting these things on a regular basis.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And now it is time for your closing arguments. Each of you gets 90 seconds to make your final pitch to some of the most engaged voters in this ward. We're going to go in reverse order of the opening statements, so it'll be Menard, Rogers, and Bromwich.
Thanks very much. C'est l'élection la plus importante depuis une génération. Il est temps de décider la direction que prendre la ville. Nous avons besoin d'un changement. Je comprends bien les problèmes qui existent et comment collaborer pour les résoudre au niveau des conseils. Vous savez que vous pouvez compter sur moi. On a la chance de faire de bons investissements et prendre des bonnes décisions quant au climat, au logement, au transport et par rapport au soutien de la santé mentale. Faites partie de notre équipe et prenez part à la transformation de notre ville. This is the most important election in Ottawa in a generation, and we really can't afford more of the same at City Hall. We are prepared to work collaboratively with the next City Council. We want that. We want to make sure that we can chart our path ahead collaboratively with Capital Ward. I think that our team understands the issues at hand, as you've heard here today. We know how to collaborate to achieve policy changes at City Hall, as we've been doing, and residents can count on our team when assistance is needed in our community. You can find more of the details. We just released a full policy platform today at menard2022.ca that includes citywide policy as well as Capital Ward policy. So I invite you to go there, give us feedback on what's present there, and really appreciate you coming out to watch our debate and look forward to continue to serve you.
Thank you. Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, David, and thanks to all of you for coming out tonight. Your attendance here is further evidence of the strong sense of community in the Capital Ward and the level of commitment by residents to ensuring that our community remains one of the best places in Canada to call home. I'm happy to have had the opportunity to introduce myself and to share some of my ideas with you. I think I've made it clear that I'm committed to work with all members of Council to ensure the City of Ottawa and the Capital Ward work for all of us. City Council has not served us well in the past 4 years. There's been too much bickering and too little effort put into the working well with others and to try to find solutions for the work that works for the majority of Ottawa residents. There has been an intransigence and unwillingness to get past personal ideologies and work for the greater good. I commit to you that I'll work with all members of Council and with relevant stakeholders to resolve the priority issues that we're facing. These include fixing our transit system, affordable housing for those in need, supporting those in need of mental health assistance while restructuring the approach to policing. We need more officers out of their cars and on bikes in the streets. We need to work in partnership with developers to slow urban sprawl, which would be good for the environment. How we move forward is up to you. Municipal elections have a far lower voter turnout than provincial or federal elections, but it is the local elections that most impact your everyday lives. Your transit system, your emergency services, your roads, your schools, and how your city looks. How those most in need are offered a helping hand. I ask for your support on October the 24th, and let's build a better Ottawa together. Thanks very much.
Ms. Bromwich.
J'ai servi comme volontaire communautaire en plusieurs rôles, dans la garderie préscolaire de mes enfants, dans les conseils d'école et aussi avec Planned Parenthood et à ce moment avec COSA, Circles of Support and Accountability Ottawa. Je suis l'agent chef du comité de la diversité de la County of Carleton Law Association et je suis membre du comité de l'égalité de l'Association du barreau de l'Ontario, aussi bien que membre de son conseil d'administration. Pour beaucoup d'années, je me suis assis à plusieurs tables à ma table de cuisine, à la table des réunions, la table des avocats dans les salles d'audience. Ces expériences m'ont préparé pour bien vous représenter au conseil municipal. Ladies and gentlemen, and everyone here, thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for your civic engagement. Thank you for listening to this. Thank you to my kids for sitting through it, and my team for being here with me. It is so important that you are here and that you are engaged, and I'm so glad that there are so many people who are going to vote in this election. You are community builders. I want to build this community with you. I want to build up Ottawa. We need a fresh start. We need collegiality and collaboration around the council table. We need negotiation. And my mission in running for city council here is to bring my conflict resolution training and passion for a fair process, my years of experience, my education. I've been nice, but it is Dr. Bromwich. We can do hard things together. We can solve complex problems in creative ways that serve us all. I hope to earn your vote on election day. I hope we speak. I hope you reach out to me. I hope we thrive together going forward. As I said, I'm more than qualified. I'm more than ready. I ask for your vote. Let's build up Ottawa together. Let's collaborate and make things better.
I said in the back room when we were drawing the numbers that this ward is always spoiled with candidates, and I think the last hour and a half or so has really proved it. We're lucky to have 3 accomplished, thoughtful people who all want to represent our communities and our neighborhoods. So thank you very much. Thank you all very much for coming to take part in this. A couple of concluding things. First of all, we did our very best to represent a cross-section of the questions. I know we didn't get to them all. So to those whose questions didn't get asked, I'm sorry about that. I hope you found it illuminating all the same. The candidates get to stick around for a little bit, though, so you can put your questions to them personally if you want. Also, the organizers invited candidates for school trustee to have tables here, and 3 candidates took them up on it, all, I think, for the OCDSB, Josh Rackless, Neely Kaplan-Mirth, and Jesse Lee Wallace. These folks got most of the attention, but the trustee candidates are also looking to be in charge of spending hundreds of millions of dollars and our kids. So ask them tough questions too. And thank you to the organizers. Thank you to the people who curated the questions. Thank you all.